Chapter 5 and 20. Question 1. Anthony currently earns 25 an hour and works for 40 hours a week. When his boss offers to pay him 29 an hour, Anthony decides to accept the offer but decides to keep working 40 hours. What is the effect of Anthony's decision on the labor supply curve? The income effect, so let's see what are the options, right? So we need to first understand labor supply, right? So if we don't understand the labor supply demand and labor supply curve, we should review chapter 20. I've covered a lot about those in chapter 20 video. Now let's look at the four options. The first option says the income effect is larger than the substitution effect. The substitution effect is larger than income effect. Substitution and income effects cancel, offset each other. There's not enough information. So to answer this, we need to first understand what is income effect, what is substitution effect, and what is labor supply curve. So without knowing that, we will not be able to answer this. So let's try to recap what is this impact of earning more from $25 to $29. So there's a real wage increase of $4 for Anthony. What is the impact of real wage on its income effect, substitution effects? What's the total impact? So to recap, income effect and substitution effects are two effects that happen when there is a change, an external change. In this case, a real wage has increased. So there can be many triggers for income effect and substitution effect. Real wage increase is just one trigger. Income effect and substitution effect can also happen, let's say, when price of goods go down. You were buying, let's say, 5 movie tickets at a certain income, and let's say your income stays the same, and now you are movie tickets now half the price, so the price of goods reduced. That was another trigger, but your income is still the same. Even then there is income effect and substitution effect, because now you're richer, because you are able to spend less and still get the same movie tickets. So it's just an example. Wage increase is a trigger, but there are many triggers that can have impact on income effect and substitution effect. I gave you an example of reduction in price of goods is another trigger. So now that we understand that any external event has these two effects, let's try to recap what does that actually mean. So in this case, what's actually happening is Anthony will be thinking about trade-offs between leisure and work, right? Because he's getting 25 an hour and he's working 40 hours a week, and let's say he spent 20 hours on leisure. So if leisure is on y-axis, work is on x-axis, we can draw this budget line, which is basically he makes $1,000, right, of income at 25 hours, 25 an hour. So this is an indifference budget line. This is indifference curve that we've seen in micro, right? So for this specific example, the trade-off is between leisure and work. What should he do, right? And this is his stable equilibrium. He's gonna spend 20 hours in leisure, 40 hours at work, and that's what he's okay doing with $25 an hour. Now this is his base case, right? So far so good. This is base case at 20 at the budget line in black. Now what has happened is he has had an increase in real wage, which is this blue line. So 25 an hour now has become 29 an hour. So he makes $1,160 instead of $1,000. So this black line, the income effect is an upward pressure. There's a shift in line up to the right, because now all of a sudden he can afford all of these goods because he's making more money, right? And so his budget line shifts up to the right. So there's an upward pressure where, if you see, he can now afford leisure more, right? Because he's making more money. So instead of 20 hours of leisure, which is the y-axis, remember, he can spend more on leisure, and hypothetically, let's say it goes from 20 to 30 hours, and he can make more money too, right? So there's an upward pressure from A to B when there is an income effect. There's an income effect and a substitution effect, right? That has this upward pressure. This is a combination. This upward pressure is a combination, right? It's not just the income effect, but there is, as we can see, there is an upward pressure here. So this, we don't know how much, but this is what is the concept, right? So the wage increase has an upward pressure. The budget line just shifts up. That's all you need to remember. Now, what are we given in this case? It's the contribution of work hours. So he's saying, hey, look, I don't want to work less. So we then have to draw this green line, which basically says, hey, I'm going to keep the same amount of, I value leisure the same, right? Because you're not buying more of it, you're contributing the same. But at the same time, you're going to be making more money. So this intersects the blue line here. So then what happens is there is a downward pressure. How do we get this? So the way you do this, the way you get this line is, the way you get point C is you see the intersection as to where does this green line, starting at this black intersection on the left and blue intersection on the right, where does this intersect this previous curve, right? And then that's your point. So in a sense, there's a downward pressure, and this intuitively makes sense as well, right? Because what you're saying is that, hey, look, I want to not spend as much time in leisure because there is an opportunity cost of getting more money if I were to work, meaning I will substitute leisure out. So there is a downward pressure on substituting leisure out. So there's this downward pressure. So there's a downward pressure from A to C, and there's an upward pressure from A to B. And we don't know the extent to which these pressures exist, right? But now, once we know these concepts, what we can see is, let's find out what's given in the case. So what's given in the case is that there's an upward pressure to buy more leisure because of income effect. And so we know that when wages go up, you can buy more leisure. And so there's also a tendency to work less because work is inferior good compared to leisure when it comes to enjoyment, let's say. So there's that upward pressure. But the opposite is also true. If you think about opportunity cost, which is like, hey, if I were to spend more hours, I can, instead of 40, I can do 80 hours, and at higher cost, then I would want to work more, and at that point leisure becomes inferior good. I want to substitute that out. So there are these two pressures, but what's given in the case is that, given in the question is that there is no change in leisure and there's no change in work. And so basically they're canceling each other out. So that's the answer. That substitution and income effects offset each other completely, because he's keeping to work 40 hours. So there is zero impact on the supply curve of hours given from aggregate that he's contributing to the labor supply, right? So there's no change in labor supply. So that is offsetted. He continues to work the same. Thanks.